And now we'll be moving over to Alan MacSporran, the Chairperson of the Crime and Corruption Commission, with a presentation on the roles and functions of the Commission. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Paxton, and good morning, everyone. Just before I start my presentation, I'd like to show you a short video just to set the scene about one of our investigative outcomes.
So yeah, my name's Carl Wulff. I'm married with 2 children, grown-up children. I was the Chief Executive Officer of Ipswich City Council from July 2006 until December 2013. I held other Chief Executive Officer positions in Victoria and New South Wales. I'm now retired and I'm speaking to you now from the Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre, where I'm on remand waiting sentencing, which will happen next week. So I now expect to be here for some time. This has a massive effect. I don't think, I've been through a lot of things in my life, divorces and death in the family and things like that, and all of those basically pale into insignificance compared to the impact of being charged with a corruption and pervert the course of justice charge that I was back in October 2017. Everything else in your life probably pales into insignificance. The only thing I could think of that would even be comparable would be if you were told you had a terminal illness. Well, my occupation, I qualified as an engineer and undertook the roles of Chief Executive Officer for more than 10 years. I guess in my case, when this all happened, I was already retired, but if this had happened to me 20 years ago, basically my career would have been over in local government, and the chances of getting any sort of job other than some menial task, a low-paying menial task, would be pretty unrealistic. So for something like this to happen to you, it would really just wipe out the rest of your career, forget what any aspirations you had for your career, and basically look for something else, but it's not going to be satisfying or as well-paying or as interesting as the career that you've given up because of stupid mistakes. It's at times like this you find out who your real friends are, and I can tell you that there aren't many. You soon find out most people who are friends, or you think are friends because of the position you hold or whatever, but I know that now I can count on one hand the people who I'd classify as still being friends. Well, financial effects are also devastating because, first of all, you've lost your job, unlikely to get another job in any time soon, so you generally have no income. You have to engage lawyers, which is a sensible thing to do, but they're not cheap. And then things happen such as the confiscation. People come back and whatever you got in terms of corrupt monies received, they'll take that back from you. So, and if you don't have it, you have to find a way to get that money. In my case, I had preempted this and actually sold our home and had the money available, which I'd already put into the lawyer's trust account for that purpose, which was fortunate because the orders for confiscation resulted in the banks freezing all my accounts. So whatever money you've got in the bank, all of a sudden under the confiscation orders, your whole income stream and your whole access to funds are totally frozen, and the banks will not release that until the confiscation orders are lifted. So it's a devastating aspect that you have to sell your own home and return all the money that you've ever got from your corrupt activity, and you have no income, and in the short term you may have no access to any money that you happen to have in the bank. I think in my case, my family's always been very supportive, but I'm the oldest in the family, and my father's dead, and I'm the over power of attorney from my mother, who's 92. I've always been looked on and respected in the family as being the sort of pseudo father figure and dependable, reliable, and all those sort of things. Even though they say that they still have, the respect for me and still hold me in esteem and that sort of thing, I'm sure that there is a significant amount of disappointment and disbelief from them that this has all happened. And to some extent, the family and the extended family are also subject to the embarrassment of the media and the publication and people asking them what's happening and what's going on. So not only do you suffer stress, but all those people around you, family and friends, also are suffering some degree of stress as a consequence. Nothing in life can prepare you for being in prison unless you've been in prison. I know one of the lawyers said to me, you'll probably be okay after a couple of weeks to get used to it. Well, I've been here now 7 weeks and I'm probably only just getting used to it now. It's a total loss of your freedom. Certainly the most, I've probably not experienced this level of anxiety on a daily basis that since I've been in prison. So every day you wake up, you're not sure what's going to happen. It's a volatile environment. There's a lot of different people with different issues. So it's certainly not somewhere that you want to ever find yourself. So sitting through many of these fraud prevention and corruption identification processes in the past, and I've sat through many of them, they're really not targeted at what really happens. They're targeted at a theory, how to put programs into place, how to tell people how to identify corruption, how to report it, what programs to put into the system to pick up double payments and all these sort of things that happen. That's fine, that's a theoretical computer-driven response to fraud and corruption. But I've never actually seen any training or any educational facility that actually relates to a real-world event where somebody is talking about their experience and how bad it is and how difficult it will be for somebody if they end up in this position. And a theoretical educational program will never come across with a heavy-hitting approach and an understanding for people to know what they could expect. And even if you think you know what you can expect, I can tell you that what actually happens is far worse than your expectations. And I'm learning it the hard way.
Well, thank you, and I hope you found that informative. Can I just commend to you that video? Not only that video, the one I've just shown you is the shortened version of the video on our website, which is easily accessible, as you know. The full video is there. It's 22 or so minutes. It goes into a lot of other aspects to Carl Wulff's background and story and the effect on him personally. So it's a very, very powerful anti-corruption prevention message, and I think it's that's one of the reasons I've shown you this before I started my presentation. So I commend it to you. It's worth looking at just to alert you to the things that can happen and the catastrophic consequences of allowing yourself to be compromised in any way. As in Carl's story, it can start with very small attempts to compromise, and once you're compromised, and no matter what method, you are forever compromised. So it's a salutary lesson. Just see if we can move the slide along. This is what I want to talk to you about today briefly. It's who we are, what we do, reporting and dealing with corrupt conduct, prevention, and finally key messages. So who we are. We've been in operation now. This is our 31st year. We were born, as you probably know, out of the landmark Fitzgerald Inquiry report in 1989. Our jurisdiction is confined to Queensland. We have a budget of about $67 million currently, which is a lot of money obviously, but for the sort of work we do, it of course is, like all of these agencies, never enough. But it's a large amount of money, as you can see. Our vision and purpose is to have safe communities supported by fair and ethical public institutions. We're an independent agency dedicated to combating major crime and reducing corruption in the sector for the benefit of the entire Queensland community. Our areas of work, we have portfolios in crime, corruption, proceeds of crime and witness protection. So our jurisdiction is widespread. We have a number, as you can see, of separate individual businesses under the banner of the CCC. Here's our objectives and areas of focus. Relevantly in the corruption space, we want to build corruption-resistant public institutions through capability development, advisory, auditing and strategic intelligence services, and of course investigate and oversee investigations into serious and systemic public sector corruption and police misconduct. And you can see our areas of focus in the current year. Relevantly, corruption involving elected officials, misuse of confidential information and exploitation of public sector resources. Those areas of focus have remained in that space roughly the same for a number of years now, and I expect will be ongoing. So who we are, our staff is roughly 360 people. It consists of multidisciplinary teams involving all of those individual disciplines. Police, we have police who are seconded to our agency. There's about 85 of them currently. They come for 3 to 5 years and then return to the police service. We also have civilian investigators, financial investigators, lawyers and those other areas of expertise. So it's a diverse workforce under the one roof. Our strategic leadership and oversight, I'm a full-time chairperson. I consist of a board that governs the Commission really. I have a deputy chair who's part-time, and I have 3 part-time commissioners. We constitute the Commission, which is just like a board of a company, and then we'll have a Chief Executive Officer and heads of the other disciplines as you see on the chart. The national context is interesting because all states and now territories have an anti-corruption body, but we are the only body that also deals with organised crime. All of the other bodies are limited to corruption functions. We have also contact with the other Commonwealth agencies. You see listed on the bottom right hand of the slide there. And in addition, we have partners around the world globally, such as the FBI, Interpol, Scotland Yard, the National Crime Agency in the UK. So we have the ability to reach out to all of those partners globally, as well as the national context you see here. So what we do, our corruption function is set out here on the slide. There's nothing terribly novel about all of that. We take very seriously not only our investigative capacity and responsibility, but also our need to upskill and educate others in the public sector, such as your sector, to help you identify, be alert to and avoid and mitigate corruption risks in your sector. Units of public administration within our jurisdiction, relevantly for you, local governments, elected officials. And you can see that our jurisdiction is very widespread and goes right across the public sector, including courts, tribunals and boards. We have special powers, quite extraordinary powers really, coercive hearings, telephone interception and access warrants, search warrants and surveillance device warrants. Those powers, I can assure you, extraordinary though they are, they're taken extremely seriously by us. They're not routinely granted. We have to justify the use of them. And our use of them is monitored regularly, not just by our oversight committee, but by the agent of that committee, being the Parliamentary Commissioner, who audits and monitors our use of those extraordinary powers routinely. The last thing we would want is to do something improper or inappropriate in relation to those powers and risk losing them because they are, as it turns out, I can assure you, our most important and productive investigative tools. This is a bit of a snapshot of our work. It relates to the July 18 to June 19, so it's slightly out of date now, but it's reflective generally of the sort of scope of our work. The number of complaints we have, you see the number of assessed complaints is higher because it's an ongoing process of assessing complaints that have come in the previous period. The corruption investigations there on the middle box on the left, our crime investigations, our witness protection function, which is extremely important for obvious reasons. We haven't yet lost a customer, I'm proud to say. Our proceeds of crime function, we take the money from criminals and that's forfeited to the state, becomes part of consolidated revenue. At the bottom there you see our hearings. There were 244 days of hearings and 3 days of public hearings. That, as I say, is a very important part of our investigative capability. And in our prevention space, we've produced 5 audit reports and 82 prevention recommendations. So it's a busy area. Belcarra you're aware of. I'll encourage you to read that report. It started out as after complaints from the 2016 election into those practices undertaken by candidates for those councils, Gold Coast, Ipswich, Moreton Bay and Logan. The allegation types are there. We've made a public report which had 31 recommendations which were accepted virtually totally by the government to their credit and led to widespread reform which is ongoing, I'm pleased to say, and is going further than even the recommendations we made from Belcarra. So it's widespread reform that's been welcomed across the sector and has hopefully made your jobs as newly and ongoing elected officials a little easier by way of guidance and direction. Out of Belcarra came some landmark investigations in Ipswich, particularly Logan, Gold Coast and Moreton Bay, and also some of the Indigenous councils. Regrettably, but necessarily, there have been a range of criminal charges laid out of those investigations. Ipswich, of course, as you've seen, involved Carl Wulff, 2 mayors, another CEO and so on. Many of those matters are still currently before the court, as they are in respect of the Logan and Moreton Bay and Palm Island regional councils. The Gold Coast Council, we published a public report, Operation Yabba, which gave some stark reminders about unsatisfactory practices that were engaged in by that council, and the management, I should say, of that council. So I encourage you to read those reports where they exist, particularly the Ipswich and Gold Coast Council reports, which are meant to be another way to educate and alert you to some of the pitfalls and dangers that need to be addressed in the corruption prevention space. So, tell you something about reporting and dealing with corrupt conduct. Corrupt conduct is defined in section 15 of our Act. It's set out there. Frankly, it's a fairly complex definition. Even our lawyers who've dealt with it for years would not say for a moment it's simple and easily understood. Subsection 2 of the definition goes on to outline and extend our jurisdiction somewhat to allow it to take care of people who are not public officials themselves, but through their conduct seek to influence public officials. That's a necessary extension because, as you know, with the increasing numbers of public and private partnerships, there's a lot of work done to influence the work that you do from outside your sector, and you have to necessarily deal with that from time to time. So the definition is meant to cover all of those things, and hopefully it does. Here's how we deal with complaints. Essentially, when a complaint comes in, it's assessed. We might assess it as being able to be referred back to the agency to be investigated or dealt with, subject to our monitoring in various levels or an audit later by us of how it's been handled. If we decide that it's serious enough under our Act to investigate ourselves and we retain the investigation, it might result in us laying criminal charges, or it might result in us referring evidence gathered back to the agency, including the Commissioner of Police or the Mayor or CEO of your council, to deal with internally by way of disciplinary action. Or it may be referred by us ultimately to QCAT, the Queensland Civil Administrative Tribunal, if we're not happy with the way it's been dealt with internally. So that's how generally we deal with complaints that come in. It's a mandated, orderly process, and we try to keep complainants informed as to how that process is progressing. We have a guide called Corruption in Focus. It's designed to assist you in understanding our jurisdiction and how you should deal with complaints that come to you, and whether they're what the test is for you to refer complaints that come to you to be referred on to us. That deals with some of the complexities I've referred to in our definition, and as I say, is designed to help you understand how to process these things and to give you some significant guidance. So I commend that to you. It's on our website. It's easily downloaded or looked at online. So go to our website and take the time to look at what we've got there to assist you in this important work you may have to do in the future. Prevention, can I say something about prevention? In my view, prevention is our most critically important function. It's no longer sustainable in the long term to simply continue to enforce the law, although that's necessary. Even police services around the world have come to understand that enforcement is not the answer. You have to get ahead of the game and prevent or disrupt at least, rather than rely on enforcement as the go-to position. So prevention is critically important. You need to understand how to recognise risks, how to get ahead of the game and put in place measures in your policies and procedures and your workshops with your staff to have them understand how to prevent corruption getting out of control. And that's the advantage of things like the Wulff video, which give a very real, practical example of the things that can arise. This series of resources available on our website, I again commend highly to you. They're designed to help you. They cover the range of things, as you can see there. Our Prevention in Focus series, our Fraud and Corruption Control Best Practice Guide, our advisories, case studies and reports, and our joint agency communiques. They're all designed to assist you understand your jurisdiction and deal with the myriad of problems you're going to face in your important work over the next 4 years of your term. So prevention, take it seriously, make sure your staff take it seriously, and get on top of it and work to prevent things getting out of control before they become a messy problem that you may have to deal with and suffer the inevitable reputational damage that comes with it. So what are the key messages? There are the common allegations that are made in this area. Can I particularly alert you to, as Nikola has, to the problem with conflicts of interest. That is, in our experience, the single most important thing you need to understand. There is nothing wrong with having a conflict of interest. It's quite normal, as Nikola has said. The problem is not declaring it and managing it. I mean, take for instance a remote council where some of you are stationed. It is very difficult not to do your work without having conflicts of interest. You might be a mayor, an elected official, as part of a committee giving a roadworks contract. The roadwork contractor, one of whom has tendered for the job, is your uncle. It might be your brother, your father, or certainly a very close friend. They might be a preferred tenderer because they've got experience in the job, they've got the cheapest price, they're the only one that has the relevant machinery. Common sense would dictate they should have the contract. But that whole process could go completely off the rails if you didn't declare the fact that they are a relative of yours and that you should stand back from making the decision, or at least declare the conflict and say it's managed by making sure that relationship has nothing to do with the awarding of the contract. The contract is awarded for documented, sensible commercial reasons. They've got the experience, they're the cheapest price, they're the most able to do the work with the machinery they've got. So all of those reasons, if someone queries how your brother got the contract, you can say, here are the commercially documented, sensible reasons how they got it. And not because they're my brother, or father or uncle, but because they're the best suited and able to do the contract. It's a simple method to just tune your thinking to, rather than say, I know I've done nothing wrong, so I don't have to declare this conflict, to what if someone who didn't know me would think about the contract being awarded to my brother? Would they think that was potentially corrupt? Well, of course they would. So they need to be told in a documented, transparent fashion that the fact that they're related to you had nothing to do with your relationship. It's for good commercial reasons. It's your best defence. Think carefully about it. Transparency and accountability is the answer. So be upfront about these things. If in doubt, disclose it and get some advice and help from your co-committee members, your co-staff, and work through it in a careful, sensible, respectful way. And you can't get into trouble if you do that. So finally, here's a message from the Electoral Commission of Queensland. Because you've just been elected or re-elected, remember the due date of 13 July this year, and those things have to be in place. So take the time to understand that, as I'm sure you do. Don't miss the deadline, because as you'll see there, you risk automatically vacating office if you fail to lodge a return by that due date. So, and if you have any problem with it, you're unsure, there's the number to be in contact with the Funding Disclosure and Compliance Unit at the ECQ. So they're there to help you as much as we are. So take the time to get on board and make sure you do the right thing for yourself and your council. So thanks very much for your attention. I hope it's been helpful to you. Just continually bear in mind that we're here to help you. Although we carry a big stick and need to enforce the regulations and laws necessarily, our very critically important function is to help you do your important work for the community of Queensland. So again, thank you and congratulations and all the best for the future. I'll hand over now to Florian, or Paxton wants to say a few words first, I think.
Thanks, Alan. Some great information and insights there about the Crime and Corruption Commission roles and functions. I'll just remind our audience that we are taking questions at the end of Kath's presentation. Good to see a few questions have already come through. That's terrific. Now, there is a bit of a delay between what we're talking to you, when we're talking to you, and us receiving the questions. So please, if you've got any questions, start sending those through now, so we can get ready for the questions after Kathleen, and that would be great.